Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another news roundup with me, the Beardy Gaymer. Tonight, I am joined by the one, the only, the Dungeon Master himself, Mr. Batuus.
Thank you, Beardy.
Welcome.
Happy to be here.
Good. Glad to have you on for a little bit of news.
A little bit of the news.
A little bit of news. Just going to say a quick hello to KXQ Slayer. Nice to see you in the chat. Hello this evening. So you know why you're here, you know what it is, it's the news round. We're going to go through some news for this week. I've been trawling the internet for all the lovely news stories from this week that's been gripping the gaming world, and I've distilled them all down into a little roundup. Tonight we have got 6 items, our little reported. Starting with number 1. Sound the sirens, Alessa is coming. Is Silent Hill making a comeback? We're going to go to the IGN with Matt TM King with his report, but I do have a little thing that I need to put in here first. So, there's been an update since this story broke. The guy that interviewed the composer, who we're going to talk about in a minute, is a YouTuber by the name of Al-Hub, and he's been asked to take the video down. Not too sure who's asked him to take it down. They've reached out to Konami for a comment, but it's been taken down, so maybe there's a bit more fuel to this fire, but let's get into the first story. The legendary composer Akira Makito, best known for his work on Silent Hill, Kotra, and then the recent release The Medium, has teased announcements this summer saying that something that people are hoping to hear about. Yamakoko, I think I'm saying his name right, was recently interviewed on the YouTube channel Al-Hub for his work as composer on The Medium. In the interview, he was asked if there was any other projects that he was working on, to which he said, "You'll probably hear something this summer to be announced." He then added, "And I think it's one you're going to be kind of hoping to hear about." Oh dear. Pussy Cartoon is correcting me. Listen, I'm going to butcher names. I apologize in front. Yamaka Kongo. No. Sorry, it's going to happen. Let's get back to the story. Let's be honest. Tinfoil hats are out and the signs are all pointing to a new Silent Hill project, which has been birthing many a rumor about its current state since the cancellation of PT. Last year, there was a leaker that said he was aware of 2 projects that were being worked on in the franchise. One was a soft reboot, and the other was more of an episodic game like Telltale's kind of style. This is then added to the fact that a former Team Silent director, I'm going to ruin this as well, Kiichiro Yoyoma, who recently set up Boketh Game Studios, has said that he's working on a horror action adventure game. Now let's sprinkle that in with another person that's a Team Silent alumni, which is the art director Masahiro Ito's tweet saying that he's working on a title and he hopes it's something that's not going to be cancelled. All roads seem to be pointing towards Silent Hill, but what do you think, Batuist?
Well, if they're all pointing to Silent Hill, we know those are some scary-ass roads, because that's what I remember is the whole stop sign, or not the stop sign, the Silent Hill sign when you're out on the road. See, I don't think anyone's going to be upset at all for any new Silent Hills. It's a lot like Resident Evil, where anytime you see one of them possibly in development, you can kind of get your hopes up, especially if you've got some good names behind the development for it.
100%. It's something that's been circling so many times since PT was cancelled. You know, Konami,
So
Kojima.
Remind me what PT is.
So PT was the playable teaser that came out in, I think it was 2015 off the top of my head. It was this whole like on the download thing that got dropped onto the PlayStation's network store in an E3. And it was basically a corridor, and you walked around this corridor, and if you managed to figure out all the puzzles and the hints and everything else that were going on in it, you came across this trailer at the end of it, which was Norman Reedus walking down the street. It was a bit foggy, a bit weird, and then the camera kind of panned out, and it was then Silent Hills came up in the background. So it was a project that Kojima was working on with Norman Reedus and Guillermo del Toro. I've butchered that name as well, so I'm really sorry, Pussycat Tycoon. You're gonna have to live with this. Um, and it was this huge thing that just took over the internet. Everybody was in love with it. And then Kojima, Konami, they split up. They weren't friends anymore, and the project got cancelled. And since that cancellation, there's been all these rumors that Konami may be working on something. They are working on something. They could be giving it to Sony to do something. Maybe they turned up with a truck full of money and got all the licensing and stuff. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I can see why people are waiting on bated breath for any kind of concrete news about this.
Yeah. I think it's really cool that they're saying it's going to be summertime. So, could this be an whatever E3 is going to be this year? Don't know if it's going to be a live event again. Maybe something pre-recorded. E3's kind of been disappearing over the last few years anyways. It's become less and less relevant as more studios decide to go off and do their own thing.
Hmm.
Biggest one being Sony a couple of years ago, kind of pulling out and saying, hey, look, we're just going to do our own thing now. So it'd be really cool to see if anything comes around. But I do think it's really interesting that we've got, this former composer, a former game director, and a former artist that all worked on Silent Hill, all talking at different points throughout the last sort of 12 months, saying, look, we're working on something. We're hoping it's not going to get cancelled. It's action, survival horror. Um, yeah, I think all things are kind of pointing towards this, and I'd be super excited if it was.
Me
Konami needs to
too.
start making games again. And especially after last week as well, with Konami coming out and saying, listen, we've consolidated our departments and our the studios that are making our games, so it's easier for them to make games and they can react quicker and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully this is kind of them laying the groundwork to maybe bring back some of those franchises, not just Silent Hill, but Castlevania, you know,
Ooh.
things like that. Metal Gear Solid, as much as I don't want them to touch Metal Gear Solid, but I think if they were to gonna, give that out to maybe Blue Point to make a remake of the original or something like that, that'd be really cool. But maybe just making use of all these franchises that they have that they're just not doing anything with apart from the pachinko machines.
I'd love to recapture the old Metal Gear Solid, like the first time that you see one of the big mechs that he's fighting and everything like that. I can't remember off the top of my head the name of it. It's been years since I played Metal Gear Solid, but those are some really iconic game moments. And I think a lot of the studios nowadays have been doing pretty good for their remakes. I mean, we've had some better remakes than we've had for some games that have been just regular launches.
And I think that's the thing. We're in a new age now where, from PS3 to PS4, there was a little bit of this kind of up-resing, remaking kind of thing, like releasing the same game on a different platform. It's been done to death now. But since in the PS4 generation and Xbox One generation, a bar has been set as to what is a remake, what is a remaster, and how these things should be handled. And I think now is a perfect time for these companies to start digging in those bags, looking at their old licenses and stuff, and going, hey, look, Silent Hill was an amazing franchise. It's beloved by so many people. We put this in the right hands, we're on to money. And who doesn't want money?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about the Silent Hill this morning when we were talking about it, and I played Silent Hill 1 on PlayStation and Silent Hill 2 on PlayStation 2.
Yeah.
I haven't played a Silent Hill game or anything that's been even close to it since. And I mean, those were long time ago. They would do it'd be so great to be able to have new generations be able to get back into the story, but not everybody wants to start a game when you can't even play the first and second one of something because it's on such an old system that it's hard to even get an emulator to make it work right.
Exactly.
So
I think it's a pot of gold waiting to be mined, and I think Konami needs to pull the fingers out and look what's happened with Capcom. Capcom's had some amazing sales figures at the minute, led this year by Monster Hunter and Resident Evil 3. And Resident Evil 3 was an okay remake. It wasn't as good as what we thought it was going to be after what we got with Resident Evil 2 remake, but these games, bringing them back, remaking them, bringing them to a new audience so that can be loved again, is just it's a great thing for us as gamers, and it's a great thing for them as companies making games because it gives them money, and that's what they want.
and I think there's a lot of with between remastering and remaking, there's a lot that you can do with a game and still keep the original feel of it, or add in things that the fans want or maybe don't want. Like maybe, I think we'll have some other things to talk about that later on.
100%. Let's get on to number 2 on our little story thing. I'm trying to think of a word to fucking say, but it didn't come out as anything spectacular. Story number 2, PS5 shortages seems a bit of a semi-letdown. PS5 continues to suffer supply and demand issues thanks to shortages in a semiconductor. We're going over to Sammy Barker from Push Square for his report, or her report, when it was. Their report, we'll go with that. 4.5 million PS5s were sold in the back end of 2020 since the console launched, pretty much matching up with the same figures from the PS4's launch in their kind of launch window for that same thing. But Sony could have sold a whole lot more if it wasn't for a shortage in the manufacturing chain for a semiconductor. In a recent earnings call, CFO Ikiro Tokotikai, I'm going to butcher that again, said it's difficult for us to increase production on the PS5 amid a shortage of semiconductors and other components. He continued, "We have not been able to fully meet the high level of demands for customers, but we are continuing to do everything in our power to ship as many units as possible to customers who are waiting for PS5s. Not surprising, really. Demand of consoles has been high with the current global pandemic, but also it's not a surprise for a console launch to be short. PS4 had the same sort of shortages back in 2004, which saw a 4-month stock shortage in the UK. Switch saw similar supply and demand issues. It was pretty much impossible to get hold of one when that released. And the same thing with the new Xbox. They're in a similar boat. They're having issues with being able to get chips from AMD and everything else to put out demand and stuff, so not really surprised about it. In the same call, though, the console makers have showed great profits for their gaming division with a 50% increase on profits. Spider-Man Miles Morales has also shifted 4.1 million units, which I'd be really interested to see if that's what that boils down to, whether it's PS5 or PS4 or what the mix of those two is, because obviously they release both games on both platforms, but if the uptake's quite high on PS5, that would be quite interesting for how many units they've sold already. And they've confirmed that the PS5 is being sold at a loss, which is pretty much commonplace for console sales because they try and keep the money and the price down for it and then try and make the money back through the sales, through their own stores for games and everything else. So what do you think, Bertus?
Well, I have 2 thoughts that come to mind. One was the last time any game system that anybody was looking forward to didn't have a shortage. I think maybe even the Wii U, which really wasn't a super popular console, still had shortages when they came out, if I remember correctly.
I really don't think there's been a single video game console that's come out that hasn't had supply issues.
Mm-hmm.
Because these machines are running on custom tech. It's not like a PC where they're manufacturing just one component. Mm-hmm. Different places are making different things that they then assemble to then put together and sell out as a whole unit. It is stuff that's been designed specifically for this. I'm actually surprised it's down to a semiconductor and it's not down to this custom cooling system that they have in the PS5.
Well, I can tell you one thing, that I know that the semiconductor field has gotten nuts in the last couple of years because of the increase in electric vehicles, and a lot of the same kind of semiconductors that get used in computers and video game systems also get used in these onboard electrical systems for Tesla vehicles. Over in China, you have the Neo electric vehicles, and I mean, there's new up-and-comers coming every day that's coming out with new vehicles, and so supply is going to be a bit of an issue. Devil's advocate, though, there could be some things that are good about staggered releases of consoles, because when they run out of one particular stock of the console, they can say, all right, well, we're going to rerun another run of it with our manufacturer. But hey, we figured out that if we fix this part here and this code here and this little, circuit board thing, now we're going to get less of these being broken out of the box. Mm-hmm. And so now the next run can be better, or, a year later, like in the case of the Switch, they're like, hey, the one that comes out, it's still the same Switch, but now we've got a better battery in it. It's got a little bit better, tech inside. So there's something to say about not making it so that everybody gets the first model right off the bat.
Mm.
You know,
and I guess to some extent as well, if they're making these machines and they're selling them at a loss, surely it makes more sense to only make so many so that they can predict what that loss is going to be, rather than, because if they say they make 4.5 million units and they sell all 4.5 million, then that's less of a loss for them than making 6 million units and only selling 4.5, because they've got all these extra units that they've made, lost money on, and are unable to ship. At least they can just kind of like one in, one out it.
yeah, and they don't want to spend they don't have a spare million of them sitting in a warehouse somewhere. You know what I mean? They want to keep their sales and their input to be not the same, but once the initial glut of all the people who want to get PS5s is over, you're only going to have trickle-in sales for people that are like, oh, it's been out for 2 years now, I'll get it at this Best Buy sale or something like that. Yeah. Because everybody who's a new adopter is going to get it in the first year. And so they just need to satisfy that first year or so. And then after that, it's just trickle sales from then.
Yeah, 100%. I'm sure they'll sort it out. By the end of the year, I don't think we'll have any more issues with it once we get to Christmas again. A couple of people in the chat are saying could be down to COVID. Again, we're in a global pandemic, so I would imagine that maybe demand is slightly higher because there's a lot of people, like in the UK, in England, we're in lockdown, we can't go out, we can't do anything. You know, pubs and stuff are all closed, so what we would have...
Some manufacturing places might be running on skeleton crews right now with COVID.
Yeah.
You know,
and you know, we're all hankering for new stuff. This is why a lot of movies that would have come out at the cinema started going to on-demand platforms, because the demand is there for this content to be consumed. So, you know, I think we're just a little bit more ravenous for it this time around.
There's quite a few I've heard of, like producers and directors that are a little disappointed with some of the straight to streaming releases because of COVID, because they designed all those sound and the orchestral music and all of it to be that big 3D sound that's inside of a theater. And so when nobody gets to experience that because it just goes right to streaming, I'm sure there's some audio guy somewhere that just throws up a sheet of papers and is like, whatever, screw it. You know, because you're not getting the full experience.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more director's cuts coming out in the next few years once we start being able to go back into the cinema. Like, you know, let's put Wonder Woman 1984 back in the cinema with an extra 10 minutes of footage, and it's been, you know, this is how it should have been experienced at the time. Come back to the cinema, come do that. I think that's going to happen.
Or they'll rerun them with one of those, like, come in this Tuesday afternoon sale, and, you know, everybody can come see it since nobody got to see it because of COVID. So come in for our post-COVID Wonder Woman sale and come see the movie live. And this way they can still recoup some of the costs.
Exactly.
You know?
It's their way of them having their cake and eating it. They get to sell it through these online platforms. You know, we rented Wonder Woman 1984 last weekend, I think it was. And it was like £15 for 24 hours access or 48 hours or whatever it was. And if it came back out at the cinema with like few tweaks and changes and stuff, I'd absolutely go and pay £10 to go and watch it again. So I don't think there's a lot of people out there would do the same thing.
Yeah. Well, everyone's got to be flexible and adaptable during this whole pandemic thing. So you
all got to get versatile.
Yep. We'll see where it goes.
Well, let's move on to story number 3. That's no moon. It's a big pile of cash. Disney may have altered the deal with EA, but they're still making it rain. James Batchelor over at GamesIndustry.biz gives us all the rundown. So EA Star Wars games have pocketed the company a tidy $3 billion in revenue. EA signed an exclusivity deal back in 2013 after Disney had acquired the franchise from George Lucas. Originally excited for the deal, the management that was in charge were really happy about it, but it changed over and Wilson got his hands on everything. And the rumor for a long time was that they weren't really happy with the Star Wars deal, but looks like it's turned into a money maker for them anyway. In an investors call, CEO Andrew Wilson told them that the publisher has sold 52 million copies of Star Wars games across all of its franchise so far. So the 2 Battlefront 2 games, Jedi Fallen Order and Squadrons. And when you add into the fact that they've already got Star Wars, The Old Republic and Galaxy of Heroes, which is their mobile game, no wonder the cash register is ringing. Speaking of which, Galaxy of Heroes makes up a third of the revenue, coming in at $1 billion.
Wow.
No wonder why EA loves the Wilson loot box so much.
Hmm.
Wilson was also asked if these recent changes in the deal will affect their production of Star Wars games moving forward, to which he said, I don't think you should imagine that the fact that some other people will build Star Wars games is going to change our commitment to that IP or our ability to build the appropriate numbers of games. We've had a long partnership with Disney, and you should expect us to continue to invest in our Star Wars relationship. It's been very profitable to this point, over $3 billion in net revenue bookings, and we're excited by what we'll see and be able to do in the future, but you shouldn't read this as necessarily us building less titles. We all know that a Fallen Order sequel is in the works, and there's no way that EA is going to leave some cash on the table, especially now when they're making so much off it, and the pressure has been taken from them as the sole maker of Star Wars games when it comes to PC and console. What do you think, Bob?
Better they could make a game where all you do is kill Jar Jar Binks in inventive ways, and they'd still make a profit on it.
We'd probably put a loot box in there, like Misa gonna get the guns and to kill them, like
Mm-hmm.
pull this lever here. Um, I think that the rumors about them potentially not being too happy about the Star Wars franchise is probably true because we all know that Andrew Wilson, god of the Wilson loot box, wants to put microtransactions in absolutely everything that he can possibly get his hands on. He was the guy that came up with the FIFA loot box in the first place.
Mm.
So from their perspective, making these games that, for all intents and purposes, have got a younger audience. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, as you can fucking see with all the shit that's behind me. And at 30 something years old, I am a demographic that I'm looking for, but we all know that Star Wars is for the younger generation of people. So stuffing these loot boxes into a kid's IP is very difficult for them, and they come under a lot of fire for this all the time. And the whole loot box controversy and stuff that's going on. I'm really happy that they've made this much money off Star Wars, to be honest with you, because it makes it viable for them to move it forward as a franchise and keep
Mm-hmm.
making games.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about microtransactions and what it does to games, the pros and the cons for a couple different episodes. And the thing is that I don't know what's the right amount, what's the right balance for it, because I don't know. I'm a big believer that if the only thing that a microtransaction does is make it cosmetically different, I don't care. Put whatever you want. If your kid's spending $500 on just making a skin different, then they need to be careful about that. Like the parents should pay attention to it. But when it's pay to win and you're paying money just to be able to win the game against other people and it becomes whose wallet's bigger, that's an immediate turnoff for me for any game. And so with Star Wars, because of the popularity and because of all the great characters people want, it's way too easy to turn into a microtransaction nightmare, pretty much.
100%.
So
If they're going to make something to sell or something to bolt on with these Star Wars games, it needs to be some sort of DLC. I think that's the only way they can continue to monetize these things, unless you're looking at something like Battlefront, where you can maybe buy skins or something cosmetic.
mm,
But when it comes to the single player game, which, EA is not really about that anymore, they like their online things, they like their multiplayer thing, because these microtransactions are easier to shoehorn in there. The way of making money off that game afterwards has to be DLC, which means they have to then put more of this $3 billion back into their business to fund these projects.
yeah, and like DLC is becoming more and more watered down nowadays. I mean, it's getting to the point now where if your game does have microtransactions, they're like, "Oh, we'll just give you the DLC for free.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any, you're not going to have very high expectations for it because it's free. And then we're going to charge if you want to get the special amount, then here's the microtransaction for it." And I think it lets developers get off a little bit with not having a responsibility to their consumer to create quality DLC versus just tacking on another mission set and being like, "Oh, this is DLC. We're done for the next 6 months to a year. Here's some more, microtransactions." When people like you and I and other gamers that we've talked to, they're really hungry for those like story content updates to their favorite games because that's what that's what the long-term players are going to be. Because, you know, for the people who are buying a lot of microtransactions, they don't seem to be the kind of people who are into big franchises for a long period of time. It's more of like a get it and go.
Yeah.
Whereas DLC, like I won't log on to Mass Effect to go get a new helmet, but I will log on to go get a new DLC. You know what I mean? And so
Completely
that's
agree.
where I think they need. Yeah, they need to focus on that more. But you know, money's money.
Yeah.
So
100%. I just think that when it comes to like these microtransactions and stuff, just something that popped into my head maybe would work better for Star Wars is to maybe go, hey, look, so we're bringing out Battlefront 3, and we're going to have these skin updates and everything else, and every month we're going to add new skins. So if you want access to that, you've got three options. You can either pay for in-game currency to purchase the skins with, you can pay for a season pass, so throughout that period that thing is live, so maybe they do a Clone War season or something, 60 days or whatever, and across those 60 days, the more you play that game, the more you earn to be able to like unlock these cosmetics or something like that. But you've got to put down the money for the season pass. Or once it gets to the end of the year, they can go and do like a celebration thing and be like, hey, we've done this year's worth of content. We did a season every quarter. Here is the 4 packs of customization stuff that you could have got in that season for X amount of money. And that way, everybody gets to have their own way of doing it. They can buy what they want if they want to. If they're really invested and want to season pass it, they can season pass it. Or it was like myself, for example, on the DLC front of things, usually I'll buy a DLC season pass and I'll wait for all the DLC to come out, and then I'll probably go back and play the game from beginning to end, including DLC, because usually what happens is I'll play a game, DLC will come out. By the time the DLC comes out, I'm already on to the next thing. So I'll normally just wait and then come back to it. So I don't know what you think about that.
I agree. And one point I want to make is as far as like the whole battle pass, season pass thing goes, what I like is when games give you, like example, Genshin Impact, what they do is you have a battle pass, which is their monthly, you know, season pass basically. And if you don't pay a dime for it, you still get to earn stuff based on how much you play and how many of the achievements you make and things like that. But for an extra couple bucks, you unlock the second stage of the battle pass, where people who do want to pay to get a little bit of the extras can, but everybody who doesn't want to fork over the money, or people who just don't have the money right now, they don't have to feel like they're missing out on something completely. They still get to be a part of it. And what's great is 2 weeks into the battle pass, if you get paid and now you're like, now I've got the money for it, you can go buy the second tier and you unlock everything from the beginning. And I think that's a really nice balance to do. And these developers, if they just find a way to make it so that the microtransactions are there, but nobody feels like they have to do it, then I think the community will just kind of simmer down on it a little bit and just let the games kind of just do what they're going to do.
Yeah. It's almost a little bit like the new Fortnite pass, that thing that's come out.
I don't touch Fortnite.
Neither do I, but I heard about this, and I'm probably going to get this wrong. So if anybody plays Fortnite and knows more about this, feel free to correct me in the chat. But I'm pretty sure there's a new one now where it's like maybe £10 a month or something, or $10 a month, and you get the season pass, but you also get like an amount of V-Bucks, and then you also get like so many pieces of exclusive like skins and stuff as well. So it's kind of like, hey, look, we know, paying this much for a season pass is probably like a little bit much to then expect you to then put money into it and buy skins and blah, blah, blah. So if you're playing and you're not really you don't have a lot of free cash to kind of splash around and do all these things, here's an option for you that gives you V-Bucks to be able to buy things that you want to buy. It gives you some exclusive content, so you get all these skins and stuff that no one else is going to get it unless you're on this system. And then you also get access to the season pass. Like that for me is a good way of doing it.
Well, microtransactions have existed forever. A lot of people don't even realize it, but we used to call them monthly subscription services to be able to buy into EverQuest or World of Warcraft or a dozen other different kinds of games like that. You paid 10 to 15 bucks a month, and that was just normal. And nowadays, once you've got and you still bought the original game. So you bought the game for the 50, 60 bucks or whatever it was, and then you had to pay for the monthly service fee. And then if you stopped paying the monthly service fee, you were no longer able to play your character anymore, even though you bought that game.
Yep.
And that was totally normal 10 years ago. And nowadays, games are so free monthly, that they have to make up the money some way, and so the microtransactions have to exist. But the nice thing about it is like games like Guild Wars 2. Like I can come back to Guild Wars 2 a year later, and my characters are exactly the same way they were before, and that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
I have the same thing with Star Wars: The Old Republic. I play.
mm-hmm.
I dip into it maybe once a year, but maybe for like 2 or 3 months or something, and I'll come in and I will buy the monthly whatever it is thing to get you back on to being a preferred player or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But play it out for a little bit, cancel it, come back to it a year later. Nothing's changed. I've not lost anything. Like all the stuff's still there for me to be able to use. So
Yeah, and if you ever get the itch and you're not wanting to spend the money, most of these games have a free-to-play option that you can at least go in and still wander around and do a quest or two here and there. So, yeah.
Lovely. Let's move on to story number 4. Stadia here today, Stadia gone tomorrow. Shock horror, Google seems to be making a little bit of distance from Stadia as it ceases internal game development for the platform. We're heading over to Push Square, Liam Croft. Google has looked at making... Let me start again. Google looks to be making the initial moves to put Stadia on the platform on the back burner. In an announcement, the tech company has shuttered its 2 development studios and shifting its focus to make the platform more suited for publishers. Launching less than 2 years ago, Stadia has had a rocky start, lacking many features that was touted in the reveal, and a lack of new games to support it meant that the uptake wasn't quite what was expected. The closure of the studio will affect around 150 employees, one of which is Assassin's Creed producer Jade Raymond, and Sharon Studstill, a former Santa Monica boss who worked on the God of War franchise, is also affected. Phil Harrison, VP of Google Stadia, said, "Given our focus on building the proven technology of Stadia, as well as deepening our business partnerships, we've decided that we will not be investing further in bringing exclusive content from our internal development teams, SG and E, beyond any near-term games planned. It'll be interesting to see what Google does with Stadia tech. And will it mean that things like Microsoft and xCloud or Sony and PlayStation Now will move in to try and take advantage of this tech?" RIP Stadia.
I had such high hopes for Stadia. Like when the ads first came out like a year or so ago, I was like, I love Google tech. I have Google Home all around my house. I have multiple speakers. I am a strict Android user. I can't use iPhones. I hate using iPhones. And I love all my Google stuff. It's very well integrated. And when Google Stadia came out, I was super psyched for it. And I was this close to buying into that beta early stage where it was like 300 some, 400 some dollars or something. It was
Founders Edition or something, was it?
Yeah, the Founders Edition. I was this close because I would buy Pixel phones when they came out. Like I like my Google tech. And something in me was like, Matt, you're a gamer and like that they're not going to get this right. Like they are going to screw it up and they are not going to get the right studios on board. They're not going to get the tech right. They're going to get all this hype about it. And then they are going to kind of just fall flat on their face. And that's kind of seems like what it's happened. Yeah. They had a couple of like near sparks here and there. Mm-hmm. But it couldn't pull anybody away from the 3 big guys, Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft. And it would have been much better if maybe Google Stadia from day one had just synced in with like, I don't know, join up with Facebook and do the Oculus Rift as the entire like combine the 2 platforms, or link up with Microsoft and their HoloLens technology and try to, I don't know. They didn't make the right decisions. And the way Google does with any of their products is when it's no longer useful for them, they just snip the string and let it float away. And then eventually you just wake up one day and it's not there anymore.
And I think that's the problem with Stadia and Google is they do have a history of, hey, this is this cool new thing that we're innovating on and nobody else is really doing it the way that we're doing it. It's going to be the best thing since sliced bread. And then they do it, and it doesn't turn out the way that they wanted it to, and then they just kind of go, I don't want to play with that anymore. Like, somebody else can go play with that. Yep. Stadia was a really exciting thing when it was announced, and all the bells and whistles that they said it was going to do, like the YouTube integration, being able to watch a YouTube video and have this button there going like play on Stadia, and you click on it and it launches the game and you straight into it, no loads, no anything, all
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. Really, really exciting, but I just don't think that the internet infrastructure is there at the minute to be able to support it. Yes, we're coming out with 5G at the minute, and that's going to like increase speeds and all the rest of it, but there's still so many people around the world that don't have a very good internet connection. And trying to play these games and the input lag and everything else, the idea of having the Netflix for gaming is great, but in reality, streaming a song or streaming a video is completely different to streaming a game where you have inputs and reactions and all that kind of stuff. Like, they're never gonna, at this point in time, get rid of that lag. And there's just
Hmm.
something when you play like a remote play thing. For me, I use PlayStation remote play sometimes. If I'm going back to my parents, I don't, drag my console or anything away with me, and I'll just take a controller with me, throw it in the bag, and then if I feel like playing something, whip my phone out, connect it up, and I start playing. It's great, but it's never like this is as good as playing it on the console, and that's
That's never your first
yeah,
choice. And
yeah,
that's the thing, because like I do it with Steam and the whole being able to connect them with your computer through
mm,
Steam. And it's fantastic when it works right and you're in a car on a trip somewhere, or you're sitting at like a coffee place and you want to like log into your game to go get a reward or check something that you're doing in your game. It's fantastic. But would that ever be my primary choice to play a game? No. And that was a big failing with that. And I mean, considering the fact that how many games have had big launches and normal PC and console systems that once they launch, their servers can't handle it, and they fry out. People for the first week or two can't connect until they upgrade the servers or whatever they're going to do with it. Imagine if your entire game is that way and there's no, what do you want to call it? There's no client side program that's running some of it for you. It's going, everything is through your servers. I mean, if Google had ever had a giant popular game that everybody had decided they bought into, that thing would have just caught on fire because of how much data they would have had to try to shove through that.
yeah. I think that they'd have been better off approaching Steam maybe and being like, hey, we've got this idea
Mm.
for an online platform, blah, blah, blah. But the problem is games. Now, you guys have got this huge library, all these games, everything else. People already own these games. If we can get these games on our online platform, like, what do you think? Because another thing that was like a barrier of entry is, hey, cool. The people that reviewed it, I played Stadia a little bit. It does work. There's not a massive amount of issues with it in terms of gameplay or anything like that. But thankfully, I do have a fairly good internet connection, so
Hmm.
swings and roundabouts. Um, but you're going to a new platform where it's like, well, I already own, I don't know, Assassin's Creed Origin. I already own it on my
Hmm.
PC. Why am I then going to pay again £50, $50, whatever it is, to buy this game again just so I can play it on the move? It just doesn't make sense. There should have been a way for you to already be able to import your previous purchases, which I know is like
Hmm.
a kind of dream thinking and it's never going to happen on any platform. But if they worked with somebody like Steam, maybe the uptake would have been a little bit bigger because the
Yeah, I agree with the brand recognition of Steam and how much people use it. And I mean, heck, when Steam runs their summer sales, like even if you don't use Steam, you will still run across it
mm,
on the internet. Like I'll be on Twitter and I'll be like, oh, well, now I see people talking about Steam sales. So now I'll log in and go check, see if there's one I want to play. And that's how popular that it is. And if Google had just signed up with somebody that had that kind of brand recognition and been like, we're going to partner together to give you the ultimate online library streaming experience that you can play on your computer through Steam, and then you can also play on any device anywhere. Because Steam's remote play is okay, but it's not great. And Google's remote play seems pretty good, but their library is not good.
yeah.
So if they had just combined both of their different things, it probably would have been a blowout. And then
Mhm.
after a little while, you would have just associated Google Stadia and Stream or Steam to be the premier remote play gaming platform.
Or even Epic Game Store, a new storefront, has had its issues with its own kind of marketing and
Hmm.
visuals and optics and all that kind of stuff, but they give free games out left, right, and center. Like every week, there's a new game to have for free. maybe that could have been a good draw point for the Epic Game Store to be like, hey, we'd launch this new store, blah, blah, blah. But also, not only can you buy these games through our store, play them on your computer, you can take them on the go with you. We're working with Google, blah, 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 blah. I think that's what Stadia is going to end up being. I think they're going to sell parts of this tech off to other companies to be able to either create their own version of Google Stadia or reinforce what they already have in place.
I wonder if in like 10, 20 years from now, you'll just end up buying a license for a game and whatever system that you use the license for is what it works for.
Mm.
I wonder where it's going to go in like 10, 20 years. Because I mean, the way that digital games are now are very different than what they expected them to be a generation ago.
Yeah. And
You
it's
go
like,
back and you look at articles from like 2010 and stuff, they thought that by now people wouldn't even be buying physical games anymore. And there's still a big market for the physical
mhm.
game.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that's really interesting to see where the video game industry goes in the future. Um, but just very quickly on the last point on this Google
Mhm.
Stadia thing is the other problem that every single one of these streaming platforms face is Apple, because Apple
Yeah.
locks away the fact that these people, you can't get Google Stadia on iPhone, you can't get xCloud on the iPhone because of their
Hmm.
store policies and everything else. And Apple devices make up, I think last time I checked, it was a majority of the share of people's tablets and phone devices. When you're locking out that massive part of the market, and it's only available on Android devices, that's also going to hurt people's ability to make this profitable.
Yeah, Apple doesn't like to play nice with others, and their restrictions are usually vastly different. And I am sure getting it all coded right is a huge nightmare to make it, because a lot of the other, like, example, at the core of a PlayStation 5 is a computer, at the
Hmm.
core of an Xbox is a computer. And these are mostly running off of like PC style systems, even though it's custom operating systems and
Mm.
things like that. They're not running it off of the same kind of, it's either like a Linux structure or like a Windows structure of some sort.
Yeah.
Usually down when you get down to the bare bones of it, nobody's really building on anything that's natively used for Apple other than maybe things like Adobe and stuff like that I know of. I mean, I don't know a single game developer that's like, the first and most important thing is Apple computers and like people that play on Apple. But then that's hard because the mobile gaming industry, so many people have iPhones,
Yeah.
and it's this kind of like break from reality that like Apple either needs to let go some of their restrictions and kind of play with everybody else in the same field, or other developers need to kind of band together and kind of strong arm Apple a little bit and be like, hey, we need to set some standards that everybody can agree to.
I think
You
it's a
know?
strange push and pull with this situation as well. Like, again, going back to Stadia and everything else, it's a great way to play these games, but it's not your number one choice. And
Mm-hmm.
I just can't, I can't really see a world where mobile phones or tablets or something become the go-to device to pick up and start playing console quality games or PC quality
Mm-mm.
games. I just think there will always be something about sitting down at a computer and playing a game, or sitting down on your couch and playing games, that just won't ever be able to be replaced. I think that
Yep.
maybe the future of it, which was hinted a little bit by Phil Spencer and Xbox in a little conversation I had a few weeks ago, is getting the Xbox Game Pass slash xCloud app onto TVs and just being like, hey, buy a controller, sync it up to your TV, and buy Game Pass, and you're in. That's it.
And basically streaming it to the TV the way
Yeah,
that Stadia does.
yeah.
And I mean, it already works great now. I use this computer to basically broadcast to my Xbox in my other room so
Mm,
that I can play like my PC games on here by just having a Bluetooth controller and just sitting on my couch. And
yeah.
the lag is almost non-existent. Like, I'm really surprised at how well that it actually works. And the more that Microsoft moves towards that, like all of us are interconnected, is going to really draw in people who already have a lot of Microsoft
Mm,
devices around their house,
yeah.
And it's funny, they can't make phones though, you know.
It's very true. I am the one thing I will just sprinkle on at the end here is Amazon Luna. So Amazon Luna's in beta at the minute, I think it is, like closed beta. You can apply to do it and everything else, which is pretty much Google Stadia, but not. And I think that the way that they're doing it is very interesting, where they're setting up channels. So you're gonna have like the Amazon gaming channel, so that on that channel you'll get access to all of their individual gaming properties and everything that they make as a studio or whatever. But there'll also be other channels like the Ubisoft channel, so you can sign up a little bit like a TV at the minute, where you buy your TV, you get the smart TV that has the apps and everything else, then you go in and you start paying for Netflix and for Amazon and for Disney Plus and for Hulu and whatever it is that you fancy watching or playing or whatever it is, but doing the same thing with games. I think that's going to be very interesting. Will we see the likes of, Xbox dipping into that and being a channel on Luna if it works out? No?
More than likely. I have an Amazon Prime pass because the shipping alone pays for it every year.
Yeah.
And like what's nice about it, like every time I want to watch a show and I find out, oh, where is it at? Only on Amazon Prime. I'm like, awesome.
Mm.
Like I'm super glad I have that. And there's been a small rumor floating around the internet that Amazon might actually look at buying the AMC movie theater franchise and making it so that people who have Amazon Prime passes basically get to go see the movies for either free or a reduced rate, the way that they were trying to do that movie pass thing before it died out.
Yeah, that's
And
a good idea.
I'm going to buy an Amazon Prime subscription no matter what. So if they start putting video games on there, I will definitely be playing them and trying them out.
Yeah. I think that's the one thing with Amazon, that they've got a really clever twist with it, which is like, buy this thing and you get delivery free, whatever, cool. But you also get films, and you also get music, and you also get books, and you also get all this other stuff. Like, and it locks you into that, because at this point now, why would you cancel it when you're getting free next day delivery? Like, and if you don't use the next day delivery, then you're gonna watch a film, or you're gonna listen to some music, or you're gonna get a free book. Like, there's something there for you, and the price is so low.
Comparatively, what you get, I mean,
like, why are you gonna leave it?
And if my Amazon Prime means I can go in and download Assassin's Creed or a version of it 2 months after it's been out for everybody else, but I can get it because I'm an Amazon Prime member, I will wait until it comes out, and then I will play it on it through the Amazon channel system.
Exactly. Cool. Let's
just like Xbox Pass.
Exactly, like Game Pass.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to story number 5. Did anybody ask if this was okay? So, Microsoft has approached the EU for approval of its acquisition of ZeniMax Media. James Batchelor over at GameIndustry.biz is reporting. So, after dropping a massive $7.5 billion on its purchase of ZeniMax Media, parent company to the studios such as Bethesda, Microsoft has filed a request for approval to the EU for the purchase. The announcement of the acquisition was made back in September, and this filing marks a crucial stage because they're asking for the EU's permission. This is because the EU has an antitrust policy. So with this filing, it'll be looked at by the European Commission of Antitrust Regulations before it makes a decision on March 5th. The decision can go one of two ways. So either they'll just approve it, it is what it is, you can do it, or they'll have some concessions, so you might have to change this or do that or whatever it is. Or they could open a full investigation to determine if there is any antitrust concerns. Bit of a weird one. I'd have thought this kind of thing maybe would have been done before dropping the money, but then what do I know about business?
Yeah, well, I mean, they should know better. I mean, EU always is going to have higher requirements for everything. They have higher requirements for food. They have higher requirements for like audio and video type stuff. I mean, when you've got a bunch of countries that have to agree on something that all the countries can kind of go along with, they're going to have strict standards, And so you should just know about this ahead of time. Like I would assume most developers and most companies like Microsoft have a whole bunch of lawyers that know all about this stuff. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a non-news story or what, but I thought it was interesting that that's what they're doing, and I think it's interesting that after dropping so much money on the acquisition, that now they're actually looking into this and going, "Hey, do you want to have a look? Make sure this is all okay." I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what would that mean if they turn around and go, "Actually, no, we don't approve of this. We're going to do a full investigation." And 6 months down the line, they go, "Right, we've investigated it, and we're not happy with the situation. We think it breaches antitrust." Where does that leave the acquisition? Does it stop it from going ahead? Does it mean Europe doesn't get any Bethesda games or ZeniMax games moving forward. Like, very strange.
America's over here like, yeehaw, do whatever you want.
Yeah. Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, we'll see how it develops out.
Let's move on to the final story of this episode. 4K Reaper Doom doth come this May. After teasing the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, a collection of the first 3 games, coupled with all their respective DLCs, being received of a facelift, EA has released a teaser video this week, as well as allowing some media sites and influencers behind the scenes to look at some of the improvements that we can expect to see when the game hits consoles on May 14th, 2021. We're rounding up several reports from the Game Informer's Alina Rupert, IGN's Matt TM Kim, and Push Square's Robert Ramsey. We've been through all this, got all the juicy bits, put them all together. Many a report has touted the rumour of the production of the remastered collection of Mass Effect trilogy, and here we are finally at the home stretch before it releases. Many have wondered whether this game is going to be a remaster or some kind of remake, and given the information that's come out over the last few days, I think it's going to be a little bit of both, or at least maybe somewhere in between the two. Here's a breakdown of all the information gleaned on the Mass Effect Legendary Edition. First up, we got a little bit of bad news. So the first DLC, Pinnacle Station from Mass Effect 1, will not be included in the Legendary Edition. This is due to a corruption issue with some of the source code for the game. This isn't too surprising, however, because BioWare has faced the same issue back when it brought the Mass Effect collection to PS3 all those years ago. But I do think it's a bit of a shame that in 8 years since releasing that, they haven't been able to find a way of fixing it. What do you think?
Well, a compiled program when it's all done and able to be shipped out to the customer is a lot different than what the actual source code is. We were talking about this a little bit earlier about, there's been games that have been out for years that speedrunners and people who break down the code for these games have tried to find the little inner developer channels and such in the game, and they've ran into a lot of walls. And my guess is they've got the compiled, DLC file, but the original source code just is borked. And when they try to run it, it just errors out. And it's like, how much time they want to spend on trying to fix that one versus just come out with something new or just tweak with what they have. I mean, there's a lot of DLC for the Mass Effect franchise. And if the Pinnacle Station one's the only one that they're really missing out on, I don't know. You have to figure out where you spend your money and your manpower.
Yeah. I mean, I've not played the Pinnacle Station DLC, so I'm not too sure how much it adds or doesn't add to the overall story. But I do think it's a bit of a shame. And in the article that I pulled this from on IGN, I think it was, the guys that are working on this have basically said it's heartbreaking to have to leave something on the cutting room floor that they, years ago they worked so hard on creating that now they just can't bring back because of this corruption issue. I just kind of feel like maybe, yeah, they don't have the original source code, but that DLC is still able to be downloaded.
You know what they should do is they should get it all ready put together and they should release it to the Mass Effect mod community as part of a contest and be like, if anybody can fix this and figure this out, submit it to this particular server. We'll take a look at it. Yeah. We'll make sure we'll go comb through it, make sure there's no weird code or anything. Yeah. And if you figure it out, we'll put a little DLC character of yours in there you'll be the person that gives like the mission or something. Yeah. And then gamers all over can remember that you were the one that did it. And you know what? That thing would be fixed in a weekend.
Yeah,
probably.
That'd be pretty cool. I just think that, they have this game, the files for this thing still exist to some degree. Not maybe the source code, but they have the, on a Microsoft store, you can still download this and buy it or whatever it is. I just think in 8 years, have they not figured out a way to kind of maybe do something with it? I don't know. Maybe it's a lot harder than I think it is or whatever, but I just feel like, you've got the bones there. You know what the storyline is. You know what the lines are. You can do wonders these days with ripping out audio and remastering it a little bit and changing it and tweaking it, all those kind of things. They've had to port this whole thing, which we'll go through a little bit later, from Unreal 3 to Unreal 4 anyway. So I'm sure they've had to go in and do a lot more tweaking than maybe they originally hoped for. But it's not like they're missing the entire source code for Mass Effect 1. They've still got those character models, the weapon models, everything else. I just feel like maybe it's not that much hard work to have remade this, and it wouldn't surprise me if back in the day, obviously, when they were porting it to the PS3 and this corruption had happened and everything else, would have been a bigger issue because it was much more difficult to make games and stuff back then. But I feel like the tools and stuff for making games are a little bit more intuitive and easier now. And they've had to do a lot of work to make this in Unreal Engine 4 anyway. So maybe they could have done it. I don't know.
Well, after the whole Andromeda poor reception a couple of years back, a lot of the momentum for Mass Effect kind of died down, and the diehards still love the series and the whole franchise. But I mean, just this legendary release has made people so happy, and the teaser trailers that show how good it looks. I was joking with a friend of mine who actually she sent me a message about this, and she's just like, "Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!" She's like, "I'm gonna have to get a new Xbox for this. This is amazing." Huge diehard Mass Effect fan. Shows me the video for it, and I'm like, "Yeah, it'll look great. You still won't be able to shoot anything with your assault rifle." And she's like, "Yes, but I will get to see Ashley Williams die in 4K." And so was it Ashley Williams? What's the name of the? I can't remember the name of the character. I thought it was Ashley Williams.
I know it's definitely Ashley's first name, but I don't know if it's Williams or Ashley.
Let's see. Fact check. Who can get this faster? I have to
Or
make
it
sure
is
that
Ashley Williams.
It is?
You were right.
Fantastic. All right. Yeah. So you get to see her, get taken care of in 4K. So it'll be, I think people are just happy about it. And I know I, for one, will be happy to go through. Mass Effect 2 and 3 were pretty great graphics, but Mass Effect 1 will be really neat to see with some remastering and some new graphics to it.
I think, on the grand scheme of things, we're getting a remake, well, a remaster of all these three games on current gen consoles and last gen consoles, and we've got a lot to be happy about. So the fact that one DLC is missing isn't the end of the world, but
well, they're going to fix some other stuff. It seems like you were talking about.
We're going back into this with some more roundups. So there will be no multiplayer. This has been dropped for this release. Not really much to say about that. Never really played the multiplayer in Mass Effect 3. I think it was in anyway. So one of the things that I'm very happy about is that the the Mako, is getting some much needed quality of life updates. These changes have been made on how the vehicle operates to make it more realistic and a solid driving experience. Camera controls have been tweaked, and also the targeting system has been updated so it's a little bit smoother when you're driving around, gunning things down, and a little bit less like it's been possessed, which is good. I'm happy about this.
Wow, no, I always liked the Mako. I never understood why people disliked it so much. I mean, the bugginess was fun sometimes. You could glitch it up walls in a certain way to get it into places it wouldn't normally be, and then you just get out of it, and you're just like, yeah, I'm going to park this here. Sorry.
I didn't have a massive issue with it in Mass Effect 2 or 3, but definitely 1. I went back and played that a little bit at the beginning of lockdown, and just driving that thing around is just horrible, so I'm glad that they're making some.
The updated version, I don't think it's called the Mako anymore, but the updated version that they had in Mass Effect Andromeda did steer a lot better than the Mass Effect 1. So if it's even as good as just that one, people will be happy for it.
And do you know what? It's just come to me now, which blows my mind. These guys, BioWare, okay, cool, whatever, but EA owns Need for Speed, so why aren't they getting some of the Need for Speed guys to kind of go, hey, this is how you make code for a car? I don't know.
Get a racing mission in there where you have to race other people with Makos. That'd be fun.
Mass Effect. No, wrong line. So all three games are going to be running at 60 FPS on PS4 Pro, PS5, Xbox One, X, and the Xbox Series with 4K visuals and HDR settings are going to be available. We've also got new lighting engines, deliver an overall better looking game, which, shock horror, who's fucking surprised about that? We knew it's going to look pretty. The video shows it looks pretty. There's some great side-by-side screenshots of like the original versus the new game, the new engine and stuff. So go out and have a look at those. They're really cool.
What do you quick question. What do you think on when I looked at the teaser video and they showed the old one and the new one? I noticed that your camera view is a little bit back more in the first one, and the remaster, you're a little bit closer to the shoulder area. And what do you think about that? I like it when my character's a little further away.
Um, I think it's difficult to say without being in the game because it could be a
Mm,
field of view thing on PC. Maybe they've pulled it in a little bit tighter just for the promo, just to
yeah,
kind of like get those shots in and stuff. Um, but for me, I like being able to adjust when it's kind of third person over the shoulder and being able to move around where it is that I'm going to look, especially when it comes to a shooting aspect, because it's nice to be able to get that view of everything
yeah.
that's going on around me. Because in first person, obviously, you get a better view of everything as it is, whereas in third person, you've got this block, this blind spot, which is the character. So as you're looking around or whatever, there's always going to be a point where you're going to miss something. So, but
Yeah.
we'll see how it comes out.
Yeah.
They've also made some changes to the load times, so they've been reduced. And the infamous elevator loading scenes from Hell have been cut down considerably across all three games. Not much to really
That's
talk
good.
about there. It's good. What do we expect? We're on SSDs and everything else these days, so it should be pretty fast. This one I think is really cool. So they've added a system in place so that the game's going to be a little bit more unified and expanded when it comes to character creation. So when you're making your shepherd, you're going to end up with the shepherd that you made from Mass Effect 1 following all the way through to the end of Mass Effect 3. Whereas previously, between the two or the three games, you'd end up with starting with one character and finishing with a completely other character model because
Hmm.
just the threads weren't there to hold it together. They've also added a load more character creation options with an increased number of skin tones, hairstyles, and makeup options to make a more diverse range of possibilities. I think that's great. We're in a day and age now where representation matters. Being able to create a avatar for yourself matters. Um, and being able to add these extra skin tones in there and give that mass representation for people, mass representation, to be able to be their shepherd and live that life and that fantasy, then all for it.
Yeah, I mean, there was a break in immersion when you went from one game to the other, and your character model changed a lot. Even when you tried to copy it over, it just didn't translate well. And
Mm.
I had some great characters that I lost a little of the enthusiasm to play them when I saw that they weren't the same way that I had them. And it's like that'd be the character was fine if it had been when I first started the adventure there, I wouldn't have cared, but it just kind of broke the immersion a bit. So the fact that they're going to have it clean and similar for all three games, I think a lot of people will like that.
And I remember this from back in the day playing these games. When I picked this up, and I'm halfway through Mass Effect 2 at the minute on my Xbox, I just picked default Shepherd because I thought if there's no point in me putting time and effort in creating my own person because as soon as I move this save across to Mass Effect 2, he's going to be all fucking weird and deformed anyway, so there's no point. I'll just stick
Hmm.
with the baseline character because at least that's not going
Hmm. Yep.
to. Speaking of going from one game to the next, one thing that was hoped for but it isn't going to happen is that the games won't seamlessly continue into each other once you've completed a part of the story. So when you finish Mass Effect 1, the hope was that it will just automatically just kind of go into Mass Effect 2, or there'll be like a button that says continue the story or whatever it is. Not going to be the case. You're still going to have to exit out of the game, load into Mass Effect 2, and then transfer the save across like you would have done in the old versions of the game. Um, Again, not a massive amount of things to talk about there, really.
Yeah, a little disappointing, but I can understand why they've got to do it that way. There's
Yeah.
probably a load of different back end reasons of why that makes sense to be able to start up the game, you know, from one to the other. But I think they could have just like if all you had to do was go back to the hub screen and buy and pick the new game to continue, they should have had it where like you could at least hit a button and it would just go to black screen for a while it did that in the background for you and then started the game.
Yeah.
Technically it still went to the hub, but then there was like a black screen that made it so that you didn't see all of that.
Mm.
You know, I
Or
don't know,
even,
but hey,
or even like as the credits are rolling, just like a little pop-up box that goes, "I would you like to continue the story into Mass Effect 2?"
hmm
X for yes, circle for no. You press the X, the credits still roll, but in the background it's just loading all those assets and changing everything over.
Mm-hmm. And then the fade out and then the fade back in
Yeah.
at the beginning of the new game.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Next point is that the game is running in Unreal Engine 4, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, opposed to the original Unreal Engine 3. Again, no surprises there. Unreal Engine 4 has produced some amazing games this generation. 5 looks like it's going to be the most fucking mind-blowing source engine that we've ever seen in video game development. So, I'm not surprised it's really cool.
Is there
Um,
any teased games for 5 that people are looking forward to?
I think 2021, I think, is the first year where it's going to be out to the developers. I know that Hellblade: Senua's Saga is being developed for Unreal Engine 5, but they
Mm.
did like a big, I think it's like a half an hour presentation on YouTube, if you can look for it, where they show you the creation tools on a PlayStation 5. And literally, the way that they're doing it now is it has ray tracing already baked into the software, and it's using this like weird super sampling triangular geometric thing. So you can literally take movie quality assets and drop them into the game, and it will render them perfectly. Like whereas
Mm.
before, you'd have to like rescale it or resize it or do all these weird and wonderful things. The engine now just automatically computes it in the game. There's this shot where they show this statue, and it was something like 4 trillion like triangles made up this statue in terms of pixels and all this other fucking thing. Which was like, wow, that's impressive. And then you walked into this room, and there's like 100 of them, and they were like,
Mm-hmm.
this would have been impossible in the old engine, but now because of this new thing, we only have to make this one asset once, and because of SSDs and everything else, we can just have that once on the file, and we can copy this and reuse it as many times as we want because it's not an issue anymore. Whereas before, you'd have to, those 100 statues, you'd have had to have made them in like blocks of 50 something or
Mm-hmm.
25 or whatever, render them down as one chunk for it to be able to fit and all the other things. So that's
Well,
um
efficiency tends to overall improve a game, when it doesn't have to juggle a lot of different files. So I'm all on
exactly.
board for that. It sounds really cool.
The only thing that seems to be missing from all of these reports is any changes to storyline, which is a little bit of a shame, especially for us in the LGBTQIA plus community, because we were kind of hoping that they were going to sort out that Jack situation in Mass Effect 2,
Mm-hmm.
and I was really hoping that maybe they would have added some sort of queer romance to the first game, but it's not happening, so a little bit sad about that.
Well, they already had to put all those fires out over the years for those different games. I think they're like, we just don't need to have any more bad press or any kind of bad stuff. Let's just make it. People be happy with it. There are some LGBT representation relationships in there. They're not perfect, nor are they as varied as the heterosexual standard relationships, quote unquote. But they're just trying to focus on more of the gameplay stuff. And who knows? Maybe they'll do all of this, and maybe there'll be a DLC that'll come out that will be like extra relationships DLC, and then it'll allow you to change some stuff. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit sad, but I'm not surprised at the same time because, like you said, they spent a lot of time trying to, put these fires out as it is, and from what I can tell, they've not recorded or re-recorded any lines of dialogue or anything like that. It's just here's the original. We've imported it into Unreal 4. We've done a few tweaks here and there, and then we've exported it onto PlayStation 4s and PCs and Xboxes. So um, if they're not going to go in and edit or re-record songs voiceover, then they're not going to create new voiceover and new animations and everything else to be
No.
able to do so. A
Well,
little bit
these
sad, but
these
not surprised.
these voice actors, their voices change over the years.
Yeah, that's true.
Like I was just watching. So one of the D&D shows I like to watch. A lot of people know about is Critical Role. It's a real popular one. It's a bunch of voice actors that are in the industry for video games and anime and various animation stuff like that. They play Dungeons and Dragons. They're a bunch of nerds. It's wonderful. I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. Now, I first started watching it I started watching the first season of it that takes place about 4 or 5 years ago. And all of those voice actors who play a lot of the different games are a lot younger. And I just caught a recent episode where they're all, now it's the present day and they're all about 5 years older, and their voices are so much different. And if you can't get that same person to do Miranda or Jack or any of those other different, people, that's going to break the immersion more than just using the old audio files and just letting people still have those same memories of the way that their voice actors were. Because changing the graphics of the characters is easy. Changing the voices isn't.
And I think, at the end of the day, if they didn't get those voice actors back to re-record those lines, or they couldn't get it right or whatever, I think we'd just end up in a, as much as I love it, Carrie Fisher situation in The Rise of Skywalker, where they're reusing lines that maybe they already have, and they're just trying to make it shoehorn and fit it in to this new narrative of being able to romance this character, and it just would always feel a bit off. So, it is what it is.
Yep.
Well, that brings us to the end of this week's news roundup.
Thank you for having me, Beardy. This has been
more
fun.
Than welcome. Just going to do a little bit of outro and housekeeping-y stuff as well. Out this week, just to let you know, we've got Little Nightmares 2, which is coming out on the 11th of February for PS4, Xbox One, PC, and Switch. We've got Galgun Returns. That's coming out on the 12th of February for PC and Switch. And, of course, Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury is coming out on the 12th of February as well on the Switch exclusively.
Sweet. Very cool.
Thank you very much, everyone that's joined us. Really nice to see loads of people in the chat this evening. Nice to see Pussy Tycoon again. Nice to see Llama there. KXQ Slayer. Good to see her. Pokehoods. Really nice to see you again. Marcel Boom. 2000. Thank you very much. It's been a lovely, lovely evening. Just to let you know as well, after this, we're going to take a short, maybe 20-minute recess, and then we're going to be back to play some Phasmophobia. It'll be me, Sephorius, and Llama Llama doing some ghost hunting. So go grab some snacks, get yourself a fresh beverage, and we'll be back shortly. Until next week. Oh, on Sunday, before I forget, we do have the next episode of the podcast recording, which is going to be hosted by our very own Dotted Llama, who's going to be talking about not relationships, but video game characters, LGBT representation, and whether having the option to romance a male character as a male player or protagonist / female player, protagonist and a female character, or whatever it is that you want to do, is that the same thing as having representation for our queer community in video games? Who knows? There's only one way to find out. Come back on Sunday as we record the episode. Until next time, but just say goodnight to all these lovely people.
Good night and good day.
And I have always been the Beardy Gaymer, and we'll see you shortly for some Phasmophobia. Phasmophobia? I'm screwing up the words. Bye-bye!
Bye-bye!